Here's an interesting question. Why was Judas paid 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus? How much would you have to be paid to betray your best friend, your teacher, or someone who is close to you? Sounds unthinkable, right? What's even more unthinkable is betraying the Son of God, and that too for just 30 pieces of silver. Yes, we are talking about Judas. Judas is remembered for betraying Jesus. Even the term Judas is defined by Merriam-Webster as a traitor, and especially one who betrays under the guise of friendship. Ouch. Speaking of betrayal, are you watching our videos without subscribing to our channel? Don't be a Judas and make sure to like our videos and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any of our videos. And just to make sure you're on our side, share our videos with your friends and families. I mean, what are friends for, right? Now, back to someone who did not want to be Jesus' BFF. Why is Judas known as a traitor? Did the 30 pieces of silver have a deeper meaning? To find out, let's first look at what the Gospels say about Judas. Now, Judas was one of the 12 disciples, but from the very beginning, he was described as a traitor who would betray Jesus. It might seem like a surprise if you've only heard about Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, but there are some obvious signs in earlier passages. For example, when a woman with an alabaster jar anoints Jesus' head with an expensive ointment, Judas exclaims that it's such a waste of money. While he says that the money could have been used to feed the poor, the passage goes on to say that he didn't say this because he actually cared about the poor people, but because he was a thief, and as he had the money box, he used to take what was put into it. Soon after this account, it says that Judas made a deal with the chief priests to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. But if Judas was already a thief who was making money by stealing from the money box while he was still a disciple, why did he betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? Does that amount have a greater significance? Now, according to some estimates, the 30 pieces of silver would have been worth anywhere from $90 to $3,000. So, depending on your calculations, it either wasn't worth betraying your friend or it was enough to settle you for life. So, this brings us to the question, why 30 pieces? Do we find any references to this specific amount anywhere else in scripture? Yes, we do. In the book of Zechariah, God asked the prophet Zechariah to become a shepherd of not just any flock of sheep, but a flock that was doomed for slaughter. Zechariah is hated by 3 wicked shepherds and he destroys them. Then Zechariah receives the wages for being a shepherd, 30 shekels or pieces of silver. Here Zechariah sarcastically refers to the 30 shekels as a lordly price because it is such a small amount to be paid as a shepherd. Another thing to note is that in the original Hebrew text, it says, "Throw it to the potter." The word used for potter meant both the profession of the potter and the vessel made by the potter. Now the 30 pieces are also mentioned in the book of Exodus 21 when God gives the Israelites various laws for the dealing with slaves. If a slave was accidentally killed by an ox, then the owner of the ox had to pay 30 pieces of silver to the master of the slave who was killed. So despite being a good shepherd, Zechariah was just given the price paid for the accidental death of a slave. Instead of keeping the money for himself, he rejects it and puts it back into the temple of treasury or potter. The passage also talks about how the prophet had 2 shepherd staffs, one named Grace and the other named Union. He breaks them both, the first symbolizing the end of the Mosaic covenant between God and his people, and the second symbolizing the separation of the kingdoms of Judah and Israel. Now, this isn't just a simple story about how much shepherds were paid in those days. It is a messianic prophecy about Jesus. When the chief priests plot to kill Jesus, Judas approaches them and asks, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" To which they reply, 30 pieces of silver. After seeing Jesus' unjust trial, Judas feels guilty and tries to return the money to the chief priest. When they reject the money, he throws it in the temple and goes on to hang himself. Now the chief priests can't put the money into the temple treasury since it was used to betray innocent blood. It was considered unclean. So they bought a potter's field to use as a cemetery to bury foreigners, which was also considered unclean. Finally, Matthew writes, "Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me." Let's break it down. First, Jeremiah 18 and 19 talk about God's message to Jeremiah. God asks him to go to a potter's house and purchase a potter's jar and smash it in front of the priest as a sign of the upcoming destruction of Jerusalem for their sins. Both innocent and guilty blood would be shed and the land would become a brutal sight. So Judas conspires with the three wicked shepherds, the scribes, the chief priests, and the elders to betray the innocent blood of the good shepherd for the price of a shepherd's wages. The money is rejected by Judas and thrown into the temple, only to be used to buy a potter's field for a burial place. So the entire plot to kill Jesus, the events that unfolded after Judas regretted his decisions, and even the sum of 30 shekels of silver were all meant to fulfill the Messianic prophecies in Jeremiah and Zechariah. But that's not all. In the book of Philippians 2, St. Paul talks about how Jesus humbled himself to the point of becoming a slave. This makes sense when you remember that 30 shekels of silver was not just a shepherd's salary, but also the price paid for the death of a slave as mentioned in Exodus. So the 30 pieces of silver weren't just a random amount. It was a fulfillment of the prophecies made about Jesus and his death. For our sake, Jesus was willing to be betrayed, condemned, and ultimately killed like a worthless slave and criminal on the cross. Though they had evil intentions for Jesus, Judas, the chief priests, scribes, and elders all ended up fulfilling God's plan of salvation for all of humanity. So, what do you think about this? Have you ever wondered about the 30 pieces of silver? What other messianic fulfillments would you like to know about? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, let us know by liking and subscribing to our channel. It really helps us a lot. Until next time.